A world where one Bitcoin is worth, get this, millions.
Millions.
Millions. And, he's not just talking the talk. He's putting his money where his mouth is, making these really bold moves in the cryptocurrency market. So today we're doing a deep dive on this, the wild world of Bitcoin. We've got these 2 recent articles from the Motley Fool, and we're going to try to unpack all of this, try to make sense of Saylor's predictions with some, expert help. Welcome to the show. Always good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to dive in. Let's talk Bitcoin. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so Saylor, right, he's predicting Bitcoin is going to hit, wait for it, $13 million by 2045. Is that even possible? Like, mathematically speaking?
Yeah, well, he's essentially banking on a 30% compound annual growth rate. And to be fair, Bitcoin has seen some pretty impressive gains, especially early on. Like from 2011 to 2021, its average annual return was a massive 230%. Even this year alone, it's already up over 30%.
Wow.
But here's the catch. Even Saylor himself admits that those early years of crazy explosive growth, they're not really sustainable. His prediction hinges on Bitcoin's returns eventually stabilizing and kind of settling around the S&P 500 return, plus this thing called an 8% risk premium.
Hold on. Risk premium. Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent Wall Street, what does that even mean?
Sure. Yeah, no, it basically means that investors, they expect a higher return on assets that are considered, riskier.
Yeah.
So that extra 8% in Saylor's model, that's like a bonus, right, for basically being willing to ride the Bitcoin roller coaster.
Yeah.
Because even if it stabilizes, it's still going to be way more volatile than, say, throwing your money in a traditional index fund.
So you're saying the people who got in early, they're in for a wild ride.
Oh, yeah.
But if Saylor's right, it could pay off big time.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, but let's talk about that $13 million figure for a second, because that's not just a wild ride. That's like launching into a whole new financial galaxy. What would that kind of jump even do to, the global market?
It would be huge. It would be seismic. With Bitcoin's current supply, if it hit $13 million, that would give it a market cap of, get this, $260 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
With a T. Now, just to, put that in perspective, the S&P 500, which, as you know, represents 500 of the biggest U.S. companies, that currently sits at around, $45 trillion?
Okay, yeah, now my head is officially spinning.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't reach those crazy, astronomical heights, just modest growth could still have a massive ripple effect. So, it makes sense then that you've got companies like MicroStrategy making these big, bold moves. Speaking of MicroStrategy, they've gone all in on Bitcoin, haven't they? They really have, haven't they? But just how much Bitcoin are we talking about here? How much is going all in?
So last I checked, they're sitting on a pile of 226,500 Bitcoins.
Okay.
Which, as of today, we're talking about a cool $13 billion. They're basically a Bitcoin whale.
Yeah, that's a serious chunk of change. But doesn't that make them, incredibly vulnerable? Because Bitcoin's so volatile, right? We're talking about an asset that can swing, thousands of dollars in a day, right? Didn't it, wasn't there a point in May 2022 where Bitcoin tanked from almost $60,000 down to $20,000? That's billions of dollars just wiped out. Poof. Imagine holding MicroStrategy stock during that free fall.
Oh, yeah. You're hitting on the billion-dollar question there, or should I say the $14 billion question, because you're right, MicroStrategy stock price, it's practically glued to Bitcoin's hip. They move in lockstep, so when Bitcoin's flying high, MicroStrategy, they're popping champagne. But when it crashes down, and it always does, MicroStrategy feels that pain acutely. It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, it's like riding a roller coaster, but, without a safety harness. But Saylor, he seems so confident in his whole Bitcoin is digital gold analogy. He's even compared it to a hedge against, what is it, missile strikes, I think?
Right, he's painted a pretty vivid picture. And to be fair to him, he's tapping into this sentiment, especially among, a certain segment of investors, this idea that Bitcoin offers a layer of protection, a safe haven when things get really bad. Think economic meltdowns, major political upheaval, even, as you said, those missile strikes. The argument goes that in those situations, your traditional assets, they might not hold up, but Bitcoin, because it's decentralized, because it has that digital scarcity, it could potentially retain its value.
So it's like the ultimate insurance policy for a world on the brink. I get it. I can see the appeal, but it still feels incredibly risky to put all your eggs in one basket, especially one as unpredictable and as volatile as Bitcoin.
Absolutely. It's a high-stakes gamble, no doubt. And it begs the question, right? Can MicroStrategy's actual software business, their, bread and butter,
yeah,
can that even support this risky Bitcoin bet?
Right, because they're not just a Bitcoin holding company. There's a whole software side to their business. So, like, how's that doing? Are they killing it? Are they barely scraping by? What's the story there?
You know, it's kind of a mixed bag. Their software business, which is focused on, business intelligence, analytics, it's not exactly setting the world on fire. Truth be told, their revenue has actually been declining.
Yeah.
And to make things even more, I don't know, complicated, they're also in the middle of this big transition to a subscription-based cloud model.
Well, and subscription-based cloud model, you lost me a little bit there. Could you break that down for me?
Yeah, of course. Sorry. It's this growing trend in the software world, really. Instead of companies buying software outright, they're switching to these like recurring fee models. So they pay to access it online, kind of like a Netflix for software. The idea is that it creates these more predictable long-term revenue streams for the software companies. But in the short term, it can actually hurt their bottom line because, they're not getting those big upfront payments anymore.
So less cash on hand immediately, right? When they're like pouring billions into Bitcoin, that doesn't sound like the most, I don't know, stable strategy.
No, it's definitely a bit of a head scratcher for some analysts. And it gets even more interesting because MicroStrategy, they're not just funding these Bitcoin buys through, their revenue and profits. They've actually been taking on debt to fuel this Bitcoin buying spree.
Wait. So they're going into debt, like borrowing money to buy more Bitcoin. Okay, that's a breed move even for Michael Saylor.
Yeah, bold is one way to put it. At the end of the last quarter, they had racked up over like $4 billion in liabilities. And the vast majority of that was debt. Now, their argument, of course, is that, their Bitcoin holdings, they'll eventually be worth so much that it'll completely dwarf these liabilities. But, I mean, come on, it's still a massive gamble. They're betting the entire farm on an asset class that even the most seasoned investors, they struggle to wrap their heads around.
So we have this company, MicroStrategy, and all through these two completely different stories playing out at the same time. You've got this legacy software business trying to, adapt and evolve in this world of cloud computing. And then on the other hand, you've got this high stakes, like Bitcoin fueled investment strategy that honestly feels more like something out of a financial thriller.
It's a fascinating and kind of unsettling juxtaposition. And it makes MicroStrategy really difficult to analyze, if you're coming at it from that traditional investment perspective. Is this a company that's teetering on the brink of collapse, or are they like on the cusp of something truly revolutionary?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to process, right? We have Michael Saylor, this Bitcoin evangelist, predicting a future where, one Bitcoin could buy you a mansion, a yacht, a private island, whatever. And then you have MicroStrategy, a real company with employees and customers, and they're seemingly betting their future on this whole, Bitcoin-powered vision.
Right. And I think it's really important to, step back for a second and remember, even with all of Bitcoin's, wild success in the past, even with like Saylor's, almost zealous confidence, it is still a gamble with, potentially massive payoffs, of course, but a gamble nonetheless.
Yeah.
And I think to really like truly grasp the scope of that gamble, we need to zoom out even further, look beyond just, the price of Bitcoin today, MicroStrategy strategy, all of that.
Okay, what do you mean? Like, what else is there?
Well, we've talked about like Bitcoin's price history, right? We talked about MicroStrategy strategy, but what are those other factors, right? Things that we're not even, like these articles don't even touch on, that could totally, throw a wrench in the system, influence Bitcoin's price over these next 2 decades. Because honestly, like predicting the future, it's a fool's errand, even for, for experts, right? I mean, think about it. 20 years ago, did anyone really see like the rise of smartphones coming or like social media? Did anyone really understand how the internet was going to like completely reshape our lives?
No, I mean, things change so fast. Technology especially. Who knows what crazy new tech is just around the corner, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And so much is kind of up in the air right now. Like take the whole, regulatory landscape, for example. What if governments, right, like worldwide, what if they all decided, you know what, Bitcoin, we're embracing it, we're going to integrate it into our financial systems? That would be huge.
Yeah.
That could be a massive boost. But, flip side, right? What if governments decide to like crack down on it? What if they get spooked and they're like, no, this is too risky. this is facilitating money laundering.
Hmm.
This is bad for the environment. This is going to destabilize everything. What happens then?
Yeah, governments could be like Bitcoin's biggest cheerleader, or it's like worst enemy, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's the, we can't forget about like tech advancements in general. What if like some new, even more revolutionary cryptocurrency comes along, right?
Right.
And suddenly Bitcoin is like yesterday's news.
Oh, totally. Or what if like quantum computing, advances to the point where it can like crack Bitcoin's like underlying cryptography,
Yeah.
the thing that makes it secure. Suddenly it's vulnerable, and that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all factors, right, that are practically impossible to predict.
It's true. It's like trying to predict the weather 10 years from now. And then, of course, you've got just like basic human behavior, right? You can't discount that.
Totally.
Like, will it actually become like mainstream? Will everyday people, will they start using it? Will businesses start using it? Or will it always be this thing for like, the tech savvy investors, the early adopters?
Yeah, and that's really like the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Because just like any currency, Bitcoin's value, it's all based on, it's tied to our belief in it. If enough people believe it's valuable, then it is. But belief, that's a fickle thing. It can change so quickly.
It's true. I mean, look at GameStop,
Exactly.
driven by memes.
Driven by, what some celebrity CEO tweeted that morning. It's really just like basic human emotions at play, right?
Yeah.
Fear, greed, FOMO, all that.
It's like we're all sitting around this like giant poker table, but instead of chips, we're betting on like the future of the global economy.
Yeah, pretty much. High stakes.
Super high stakes. So, okay, let's bring this back down to earth for a second. Like for someone listening to this right now, what's the takeaway? What's the one thing you want them to like really take to heart from this whole deep dive into Bitcoin and MicroStrategy and this grand experiment they've got going on?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that, whether you're thinking about Bitcoin or really any kind of investment, you got to approach it with like a healthy dose of skepticism.
A healthy dose.
Yeah, you have to be willing to think for yourself, to do your own research. Don't just take someone's word for it, even if that someone is, a charismatic billionaire like Michael Saylor. Because remember, no one can predict the future.
Right. Be skeptical, do your homework, and another big one, don't invest more than you can afford to lose. It's a cliche for a reason.
It really is. Because at the end of the day, like, no one knows how this is going to play out. Maybe Bitcoin will be worth millions someday.
Right.
Maybe you'll be, buying your coffee with a fraction of a Satoshi. Or maybe, just maybe, it'll be something completely different, some technology that hasn't even been invented yet.
Something we haven't even imagined yet.
Exactly. But one thing's for sure,
Yeah,
it's going to be a wild ride.
it really is. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.